Good morning, everyone. Um, you changed, not dramatically, not with an announcement, um, not with the speech they could have prepared a response to. You just stopped absorbing, stopped explaining, um, stopped making yourself available in the specific ways they'd been relying on without ever once asking whether the relying was actually fair. And now they're confused, um, standing in the middle of a dynamic that used to work and discovering that the mechanism that made it work, your compliance, your softness, your willingness to keep showing up, regardless of what they brought, has been quietly, completely, without warning, um, removed. And they have no idea what to do with that. Let's talk about the confusion because it's more interesting than it looks. Their confusion is not about you, not really. It's about their model of you, um, the internal representation they built from observation, from experience, from the specific data points you've been providing of who you are and how you operate. Uh, that model said, this person is warm, this person is patient, this person absorbs friction without firing back. Ugh. This person can be pushed, um, not cruelly, not consciously, but pushed, and they will find a way to manage it, um, to stay, to continue, to be there tomorrow as reliably as they were yesterday. Uh, that model was built on real data. You provided it consistently over time, uh, not because you were weak, uh, but because you were patient, because you were generous, because you believed for a long time um, that the dynamic would eventually balance itself, that the investment would eventually be returned, that the giving would eventually produce receiving. Uh, and when it didn't, uh, when the balance failed to materialize, something shifted quietly, uh, without announcement. Inside you, a threshold was crossed, a decision was made, uh, and the data you started providing um, to them and to yourself changed completely. Uh, their model is now obsolete and they haven't caught up. And the confusion, the specific bewilderment of encountering a person who no longer matches the model is what you're watching right now from a distance, calmly. Um, as someone who no longer feels responsible for making the update easier for them, this reflection invites you to consider when exactly did the threshold get crossed, not the moment you acted differently, the moment the internal decision was made. Uh, because those two moments the internal decision and the external shift are almost never the same. The decision usually comes first, um, quietly in the middle of something ordinary, um, and the behavior follows days or weeks later when the decision has solidified enough to produce action. When did you decide? What was the moment and what produced it? Specifically, that previous moments hadn't? Uh, because understanding the threshold, what finally crossed it, is what makes sure you don't find yourself standing before it again in a different version of the same situation, um, without recognizing it until it's already cost you something. Now, the savage piece, because that word in this context uh, is being used the way it's actually meant. Not cruel, not cold, um, not the performed version of not caring, designed to look impressive from the outside. The actual meaning, undomesticated, unmanaged for someone else's comfort, operating from internal standards rather than external approval, moving through the world with a clarity about what you will and won't accept, that doesn't require justification, doesn't require consensus, doesn't require anyone else's understanding before it becomes operative. Um, that version of savage, the self possessed, internally directed, nobody gets to define my limits but me version, is what they didn't see coming. Because the version of you they knew, uh, or thought they knew, was the domesticated version, the one that had been trained through the accumulated experience of this dynamic, um, to manage itself down, to make itself smaller, to prioritize the maintenance of the connection over the maintenance of the self. Um, and domesticated things, when they stop being domesticated, are shocking because the contrast with what was expected, um, is so stark that the person witnessing it cannot reconcile what they're seeing with the model they'd built. Um, the confusion right there is that reconciliation failing publicly, in real time, in front of you. Here's what's important to understand about this specific dynamic. The savage side, however new it looks to them, was never actually absent. Uh, it was always there in the same person who was being patient and generous and available. The same person, full spectrum, um, the warmth and the clarity, um, the generosity and the standards, the softness and the I know exactly what I will not continue to accept. Um, what happened is not that you became someone different. What happened is that the circumstances finally required the full version of you rather than the partial one that had been adequate until now. And the full version, visible for possibly the first time in this dynamic, contains the clarity they weren't prepared for. Um, they weren't prepared because the partial version never gave them reason to prepare. Uh, because the partial version absorbed everything, smoothed everything over, managed the friction so effectively um, that there was never any urgency to adjust their behavior, never any real consequence, um, never any signal strong enough to pierce the assumption that this was just how things worked between you until now. Um, when the signal arrived, not as a warning, but as a change in reality, not, I'm telling you this is going to change, but it already has. Um, catch up when you're ready. Uh, this reflection invites you to consider what parts of yourself have you been keeping in reserve in this relationship or dynamic in the interest of keeping things smooth, um, not just the savage side, the full range, the opinions that didn't get voiced, the needs that got minimized, um, the reactions that got managed down before they could create the friction that might have actually changed something. Because those reserved parts, all of them, not just the ones currently visible, uh, are yours to reclaim, not selectively, fully. Um, the warmth and the clarity, um, the generosity and the standards, the openness and the I know exactly where my line is simultaneously, um, without having to choose between them. Uh, because the full version of you contains all of it, um, always has. Uh, now, the heart emoji in this title, because it's sitting right there alongside the fire and the confusion. Um, and it's not an accident. Um, the savage side, when it comes from the right place, um, doesn't come from bitterness, um, doesn't come from hardness, doesn't come from the decision that caring is a liability and therefore caring less is the solution. Um, it comes from, and stay with this, a deeper form of self respect. Um, one that says, uh, I can be soft and I can be clear. I can be warm and I can have limits. I can love and I can hold a standard uh, that this connection must meet if it's going to continue receiving what I have to offer. That's not savage in the cold sense. Um, that's integration. Um, the full version of a person who carries both the heart and the standard simultaneously, um, without conflict, um, without having to choose which one to show based on who's in the room. Uh, and that integration, the carrying of both, is what they didn't see coming because they were only accounting for the heart. They saw the warmth and assumed the standard didn't exist or wasn't operational or could be negotiated around uh, indefinitely. It exists. It was always operational. Um, and it is um, apparently not negotiable. Uh, they know that now. Let's talk about what comes next. Um, because confusion in another person, when it's produced by your clarity, tends to produce one of two responses. And knowing which one is coming um, helps you respond from your center rather than from reaction. Um, the first response, um, recalibration. The person updates their model, adjusts their behavior to match the new reality, um, starts operating in a way that actually accounts for and respects the full version of you rather than the partial one. Um, this response, when it's genuine, when it's sustained, when it shows up in behavior rather than just in words, is worth receiving carefully, uh, with eyes open, but worth receiving. Because people can change, um, not instantly, not dramatically, um, but incrementally when the alternative becomes sufficiently uncomfortable and when they have enough self awareness to choose growth over ego. Some people have that capacity, and the confusion you've produced in them, if it's the kind that produces genuine reflection, um, can be the beginning of that growth. Watch for it in behavior, um, not in declarations. Behavior, um, over time, um, sustained and consistent. That's the only version worth adjusting your standards for. The second response, escalation. The person doubles down, uh, pushes harder against the boundary, trying to restore the previous dynamic through pressure, through guilt, through the specific manipulation of someone who is losing a comfortable arrangement, and is hoping that enough pressure applied in the right places, um, will return things to the configuration that served them. Um, this response, when it arrives, uh, is actually the clearest information available. It tells you directly, without ambiguity, that the relationship was built on your compliance, and without your compliance, the relationship as they understood it um, doesn't exist for them. That information, however painful, uh, is a gift because it clarifies um, definitively what was actually on offer. Um, and what was actually on offer turns out was not what you thought, was not what you deserved, uh, was not worth the compliance it required. And now you know clearly, um, without ambiguity, in a way that makes the next step, whatever it is, something you take with full information, uh, rather than the partial information that the previous dynamic was designed to provide. This reflection invites you to consider, which response are you watching right now? Recalibration or escalation? Um, and what does the honest answer, the one that's underneath the hoping, tell you about what comes next? Um, because the honest answer, however uncomfortable, um, is the foundation of every decision you make from here. And decisions made from honest foundations rather than from hope alone um, are the ones that actually serve you long term, beyond the immediate situation, um, into the version of your life that exists on the other side of this. Uh, Here's what needs to be said um, directly about maintaining what you've accessed. Uh, the savage side, ah, the clear, undomesticated, I know my standards version of you is hardest to maintain. Not when someone escalates. Ugh. When someone softens, um, because escalation is easy to hold the line against. Pressure produces counter pressure, um, and holding a boundary against someone pushing it feels instinctively right. But softening, the sudden warmth, the vulnerability, the version of them that appears right after the clarity, right after the savage side showed up, that's harder. Um, because the warmth in you, um, the genuine warmth, the heart in the emoji responds to softness. It's designed to, that's not a flaw. Uh, that's just who you are. But the softening, when it arrives immediately after the standard was enforced needs to be examined. Is this genuine growth, or is this the most effective tool available? For someone who has lost access to the comfortable arrangement, trying to recover it through a different approach, um, softness demonstrated over time, um, in the ordinary moments, not just in the reactive ones, is evidence. Um, Softness produced immediately after your clarity, deployed precisely when compliance is being sought, um, is a tactic. Um, know the difference, hold the line, um, through the softening long enough to find out which one it is, because the answer revealed through time uh, is the only one worth building from. One last thing, and this might be the most important thing in the entire reading. Uh, the savage side, um, as good as it feels to have accessed it, is not the destination. Uh, it's a correction, um, a necessary, overdue, absolutely right correction to a dynamic that had gotten too far out of balance. And corrections, uh, when they're made, tend to overcorrect slightly before settling. That's normal. That's how pendulums work. Um, the destination, um, the actual place this is heading, is integration. Um, the full version of you, warmth and standards, heart and clarity, softness and limits, um, all present simultaneously, without one requiring the suppression of the other. That version, integrated, full spectrum, nothing hidden, is what the right connections are built on, not the partial version filtered for palatability, um, not the savage version deployed as armor, um, the whole thing, all of it, um, available to anyone who can handle it. Um, and the confusion in front of you right now, um, is simply the process of finding out whether this person can. You already know who you are. Uh, you've always known. The question, um, answered by their response to your clarity, is whether there's someone worth being known by. Um, Watch closely. The answer is already forming. The power is yours. Um, it always has been. Stay in it. The full version, the heart and the clarity, um, the warmth and the standard, both, um, simultaneously, without apology, uh, without explanation. without the performance of indifference. That isn't actually you and doesn't need to be. Um, just um, all of you, visible, uh, integrated, unapologetic. Um, that's what confused them. Uh, that's what will continue to. And that's entirely their problem to solve, um, not yours. Take what resonates, softly release the rest. Trust yourself.